All right, so today we're going to start talking about migration. So, migration is the other part of the population and migration unit. And really, you can't understand the total picture about a country's population structure and population issues affecting the country if you're not talking about migration. So, we're going to introduce some key terms in this video and talk a little bit about it. But essentially, we're going to talk about um, the different factors that cause migration. So, we're going to introduce the terms push and pull factor, and we're also going to introduce some vocabulary from the unit. So I will say migration has a lot of vocabulary, but thankfully all of it is basically exactly what it sounds like. So you have a lot of international and internal migration. So meaning international migration is migration between two countries, and internal migration is migration within a country. Voluntary and forced migration, which we're going to get into each of those and talk about it. But voluntary is migration which people are choosing to move, and forced is when there's some sort of environmental or political situation that causes people to move. And then interregional and intra-regional, which I don't know why they could have picked slightly different names for these, but we will get into these a little bit later. Okay, these are maybe the only tricky ones, but the other ones, at least the vocabulary, as heavy as it is for this unit, is fairly self-explanatory. All right, and I think it's useful maybe to pause and just to skim this third column and get a sense of the type of migration for each that we're talking about. But we'll get into a lot of this throughout the unit. So I just wanted to start by connecting some migration stuff to stuff that we've just been talking about in class with the population unit. So there is something called the migration transition model. So we love our transition models in this class. We got the demographic, we got the epidemiological, and now we got the migration transition model. So I will say the migration transition model is probably the least useful of the three, and it's kind of showing its age a little bit, I think, in the application to the modern world. But we'll talk about it a little bit anyway. So in stage one countries, you see the type of and basically the migration transition model is telling us what type of migration do we see in countries kind of throughout different stages of the demographic transition model. So stage one, which we said no country is still in, we saw lots of daily or seasonal migration or mobility in search of food. So you had populations that were in large part transitory or oftentimes moved from place to place. And there are still some people in the world like that today, and we will talk about them. The Berbers in Northern Africa, a lot of some kind of nomadic peoples in different parts of the world, like the Maasai, in Africa as well, and kind of groups of Mongolia. But essentially, this type of migration is limited to a few geographic areas. Stage two, this is where you see really, really high levels of international immigration. They're pronounced the same, so immigration with an E, which means leaving a country. So I think this is the most important part of the demographic, kind of the migration transition model, is when you have countries going through their population boom, having lots and lots of population growth, you see large amounts of out migration from a country, which is to say people leaving the country. And you also see kind of within this stage and also within the next stage, lots and lots of rural to urban migration within developing countries and within less developed countries that are starting to develop. And then in stages 3 and 4, you can see them kind of grouped together. These oftentimes are destinations for migrants. So people tend to migrate up the economic ladder in terms of international migration. So to more developed countries from developing countries, to developing countries from less developed countries. And most migration in the world that fits into this pattern is based in economics. All right, good stuff. And this is a population pyramid. And I think this is kind of neat in the context of what we were just talking about. This is the age and sex of immigrants living in the United States. So you can kind of compare that with our general population pyramid and see the type of person that is most likely to immigrate or to be an immigrant living in the United States, which is to say someone who is an adult and kind of in that middle age and kind of equal amounts of men and women. All right, so let's get into some of the vocabulary terms. Like we said, kind of self-explanatory in some ways, but push factors are factors that induce people to move out of their present location. And pull factors induce people to move into a new location. So push, you're getting pushed out of a place. Pull, you're getting pulled into a place. So both of these can be a variety of reasons, but I like to stick with our SPEED acronym. So they can be social, political, economic, environmental, or demographic, which is to say there can be cultural reasons to move to a new place. Maybe there's some sort of common language or common religion or common ethnicity or some sort of cultural pull to a new place. There can be political reasons within countries or sort of among different countries. Economic, which most migration in the world is voluntary migration that's rooted in economic push and pull factors. Environmental and demographic. And demographic would be referring to, like we were talking about with the demographic transition model, when there's a large kind of a boom of population and maybe not enough jobs to support it. So maybe tying in with the economic as well. Okay, so we have push and pull factors. Two more really important terms are intervening obstacles and intervening opportunities. So intervening obstacles are basically economic, environmental, or political features that hinder migration. So environmental ones can be as simple as a mountain or a range of mountains. If you think about kind of U.S. migration before the railroad and the automobile, oftentimes mountains served as a big environmental intervening obstacle, or in a modern day sense, kind of the migration between Africa and between Syria and kind of the Syrian migrant route. You can oftentimes the Mediterranean Sea is an intervening obstacle in both of those migrations. Or you can have political intervening obstacles like walls or migration barriers, or like immigration policies. And on the other side of the coin, you have intervening opportunities, which are environmental, economic, or political features that encourage migration. So some sort of policy that serves as an opportunity for people to move to a new place, or some sort of economic situation in which people might settle down in a new place. All right. So last set of terms that we'll talk about. Here's our friend interregional and intra-regional. So these both relate to internal migration more so, which is a permanent move within the same country. So oftentimes interregional is when you have kind of movement from one region to another. So oftentimes rural to urban migration, a lot of the migration that we see within China and India would be categorized as interregional, essentially moving from the countryside or a rural part of the country to newly established urban centers that oftentimes have lots of economic opportunities. Those would be interregional, because you're moving from one region to another. And then intra-regional is within a region. And I would say these terms don't come up a ton, so don't sweat it if you're still worried about not getting your interregional and your intra-regional straight. I would say being able to describe it is more important than anything else. All right, cool.